Bianca, take it.
All right, sounds good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for a SEPTA Bus Revolution webinar for North and South Philadelphia. My name is Bianca Panuto. I'm a transportation planner with Michael Baker International. We're supporting SEPTA on the bus revolution. Tonight, we're going to, we'll start off by talking about some key themes of what we heard. Then we'll get into specific examples. We'll wrap up specific examples of changes to the routes and what you can expect to see. Wrap up with an overview of what to expect over the next few months and how you can provide more feedback. And we'll finish with a question and answer session. So looking at our registrations tonight, the highest cited routes are routes 49, 7, 33, 61, and 48. I'm going to launch a few polling questions so we can learn more about who's in the room tonight. So the first one, which part of the SEPTA region do you most often travel to for work, school, and any other reason? Choose up to 2 of these regions. All right, I'll end the poll in just a few seconds. And we can see that a lot of the folks in the room tonight are traveling to Center City, Northwest Philly, West Philly, and around North Philly as well. Our next question, what previous phases of the bus revolution have you participated in? Is this your first event? Have you participated in the phase 1 when we were just talking about the beginning, some phase 2 network options, and most recently when we presented a draft proposed network in the fall? All right. So there's a few people, this is their first event. Thank you so much for joining us. We're happy that you're here. And yeah, we see a lot of people participated in our most recent engagement in fall 2022, which is great. We're happy to share some updates about what we've changed since then. And then also we'd like to know what types of bus revolution activities have you participated in? Like we said, if it's your first event, if you've been to open houses, if you met us at a pop-up station, perhaps you took a survey, or what you were on virtual meetings in the past. All right, thank you. Yeah, and we can see from the results here that a lot of you have taken surveys in the past or participated in our virtual meetings and events.
All right, is that the end of the polling, Bianca?
Yes. My
Perfect.
apologies. Yeah, I can. And now I'm going to pass it off to Bethany Whitaker with Nelson Nygaard.
Perfect. Thank you, Bianca. And thanks to all of you for calling in tonight. I know there's lots of things that you could be doing on a Monday evening, so we really appreciate that you joined us for this discussion about SEPTA's bus revolution. So not only do I want to thank you for coming, I also want to thank everybody who participated in previous versions of the bus revolution, who filled out a survey, called into one of these meetings, stopped by one of the in-person community meetings. We really appreciate your feedback. We really appreciated what you told us about what was working, what you were concerned about. And we have tried to do our best to respond to all of these comments, or as many of them as we can. Excuse me. So, and we did listen, and hopefully you'll be happy and pleased with some of the changes that we've made from the fall, but also changes on the original or SEPTA's existing bus network. So tonight we're going to spend some time talking through what we heard, how we developed an updated draft that reflects and is rooted in that feedback that you gave us. So here's some of the things that we heard, and we've shared some of these before, but for all the new folks, I just want to make sure some of the things that we did hear a lot about in the fall was there was a lot of concerns about transfers, and it is true that the draft network that were released in the fall did have more transfers in that. People told us they didn't like the transfers. They wanted more what we call one-seat rides. That's where you're able to get on the bus and then you stay in your seat to the end, and you don't have to transfer. There was a lot of concerns about portions of routes that were eliminated or entire routes that were eliminated. There was a lot of concerns about people's personal safety and security and their sense of safety and security, especially as they're doing things like transferring between bus routes or transferring from one of the bus routes to the subway. We got a lot of comments about access to schools, the frequency of service, the weekend service, and some of this was positive, right? People also like the simplicity of the new network. So what we did was we did categorize things in a couple of ways. One was we heard loud and clear what people liked. People told us in lots of different ways, but they really appreciated having more frequency in the network so that the buses would come more often. They wouldn't need a schedule to know what time their bus was going to come. They could just walk out to the stop and wait and know a bus would be there in a few minutes. They also liked the increased frequency in the evenings and on weekend days. Those are some of the positive feedback that we received. People also like the simplicity of the network, the reduction of kind of buses that went in and out of, went to some destinations sometimes and not other times, and a lot of service patterns or different variations on how the bus route worked. We took a lot of that out, and people said that they really appreciated that. They also like this focus on connectivity. So this idea that you could use the bus network and leverage it both with regional rail and the Broad Street line and the Market Frankfurt line and get further faster. And ultimately, I think that's what most bus riders want, is to be able to get where they want to go as fast and as efficiently as possible. And so when we were able to do that with the network, people responded positively to that. So we did make a bunch of, I'm still going to go through some of the things that we heard, talk a little bit more about things like transfers. So as I mentioned, people told us that they didn't like transfers and they were frustrated by the amount of transfers that were in the draft network. So when we updated the network, we did do our best to reduce the number of trips that required a transfer, increase the number of one-seat rides, especially for short trips and people that were traveling for 1 mile or 2 miles. Folks told us that they were especially frustrated by having to transfer when they're not traveling that long and the increased time it would take on their trip. We also tried to prioritize trips with strong ridership between 2 points and make sure that those trips didn't require transfer. Another thing we heard a lot about was school service. And so we've done a bunch of things. People were concerned and they didn't see enough frequency at certain times of the day. They didn't see the bus routes that brought students directly to their schools. So we did have some meetings with the school district to understand their concerns and their needs. We have included the SEPTA bus routes that connect to schools in this network that you're seeing now. And then we also increase service levels at key times when students are going to schools so they won't be overcrowded for other riders. And then people, as I mentioned, safety is a big issue, personal security. So we did take that into consideration and listen to people's comments. We tried to reduce the number of trips that required a transfer, including to the Market Frankfurt line and the Broad Street line. We are also working with partners like the city of Philadelphia to make the bus stops and the transfer locations safer. In some cases, that may mean putting in new facilities or better lighting or better information. And then just in general, SEPTA as an organization is really focused on safety and security and working with community members and community partners to make the system as safe as it can. So the other thing that we heard quite a bit about was the route numbers. We've been, Nelson Nygaard in particular, we've been showing a draft bus network that has 3-digit numbers. People told us that was really confusing. So what we did was we tried to keep the existing numbers as much as possible and have a reference to the ones that we used before in case some people really like those. And then we're going to keep talking to riders about how we name and number the bus routes. We know that there probably will be some changes. So for example, you might see in the network that we're sharing right now, route 32-48. We're not going to call the final bus route that number. We're just using that as a placeholder to try to make it easy for you to understand what the changes are, what the new bus routes are. So hopefully that works and makes things a little bit easier for you. The other thing I just want to give just a quick overview of the SEPTA's existing bus network and the updated draft network. If you, SEPTA's existing network has 125 bus routes, 33 of those are frequent. There are no microtransit or on-demand zones in the network, and they have about 3.8 million hours of bus service. In the updated network, we have 122 bus routes. 41 of them are frequent, so about a third of all the bus routes are frequent. We are introducing on-demand service or microtransit in parts of the suburbs. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about it tonight because this conversation or this webinar is really focused on North Philadelphia and South Philadelphia. So we won't talk about on-demand, but there is information on the website about that if you're interested, or if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A. And then the updated draft network has the same number of bus service hours. And I just want to make one quick point. We've given this presentation in the past and we used 105 as the number of bus routes. We updated that number based on the way that we were counting the routes. So it is a little bit closer to the existing network, but it is also the number between what we showed before and today is how we count. There are some long and short routes, and we were counting them as one in the original numbers, and now we're counting them as two. And you'll see at least one example from that when Brandon goes over some of the routes. So with that, I'm going to introduce Brandon Miller from SEPTA, and he's going to talk about some of the individual changes to the bus routes.
Thanks, Bethany. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Miller, and I'm the Senior Operations Planner on the Service Planning and Scheduling team here at SEPTA. I grew up in Philadelphia in the Logan section of the city, grew up riding SEPTA. I'm currently a resident of Germantown, and I use the system daily, primarily taking the H or the XH bus routes and the Broad Street line. A little bit of context, a little more about myself. I've been in public transit for about 22 years, but I'm really excited that SEPTA has undertaken this initiative to refresh our bus network. All right, we've somewhat been an outlier in that case, as some agencies have actually started doing redesigns over 10 years ago. So a really exciting time to update our bus network. And throughout this process, I've been encouraging my family, neighbors, and fellow commuters to check out the proposed changes and provide feedback to really help us get this bus network right. So thanks again for your attendance this evening and your ongoing engagement throughout this project. So next slide, please, Bethany. We'll jump in. So a lot of you may remember, I'm glad to see a lot of first-time attendees on some of these calls, but last fall, we released the draft network and we've received some great feedback. So now I'm going to walk through some of the proposed changes, addressing some of the feedback that we received and really illustrating how that input has been used to refine this draft network. So starting with Route 4, it's the Route 4 from Broughton-Pattison to Fern Rock. So in the previous draft, we showed the 4 and the 16 being combined to operate via Broad Street between Fern Rock Transportation Center and the Navy Yard. The big things were that the 4 in the last draft was not serving 9th Street, and the 16 was not serving Cheltenham Avenue, north of Broad Street. So we were listening to our customers and we refined the network. And so this draft includes Route 4 being restored and operating the existing routing between Fern Rock and South Philadelphia via 9th Streets and Broad Streets. Route 16 has also been restored to retain key connections between North Philly, Alny, and Cheltenham. But a big change for the 16 in an effort to minimize duplication with Route 4 and the Broad Street line, Route 16 is being proposed to end at Broad and Lehigh. Right, and so this shorter route would enable faster and more reliable service. Service south of Lehigh Avenue on Broad Street would be provided by Route 4. Next slide, please. So for the Route 16, again, was just mentioning how we're proposing to truncate service at Lehigh Avenue to really cycle the bus faster. Customers would be able to transfer to the Broad Street line, regional rail at North Broad Station, and continue south on Broad Street via Route 4. And then you can see some of the frequency benefits also on the slide. 15-minute service during the peaks and 30 minutes throughout the rest of the day. And this would also be 30-minute service on weekends as well. Next slide, please. So now I'm jumping to South Philadelphia. I'm going to start with Route 12. And the previous draft had Route 12 actually removed from the network. We received a lot of feedback on that concept. So this updated draft restores Route 12, puts it back in the network, and retaining those key connections between South Philadelphia and Center City, but with a different version of Route 12. So the map here you see shows a shortened version of Route 12. And the route would operate between 33rd and Dickinson Loop in South Philly, and it would end at Penn's Landing. The big takeaway here for the Route 12 is that we would operate eastbound in Center City via Chestnut Street, removing service from Locust. This enables SEPTA to use the improved bus lanes along Chestnut Street and really helping to, prioritize transit in Center City. So that's the big thing for this updated version of the Route 12. It's been shortened, would not travel across the river to 49th and Woodland, and in town, it would be reliant to operate eastbound via Chestnut Street instead of Locust. Next slide, please. So this is the Route 29. Route 29 would be extended from its current terminus at Dickinson Loop across the Schuylkill to 49th and Woodland, creating new connections between South Philly and the trolley services. So essentially we're swapping the western endpoints for the 12 and the 29, right? And so customers that are traveling between Southwest Philly and Center City could actually connect to the Route 12 from the extended 29, which would be a frequent route, or the 64. So the 64 would continue crossing the Schuylkill via Grace Ferry, and the 29 would get extended over to 49th and Woodland. So if any 12 customers are in the 49th and Woodland vicinity, still have access to Center City via the 29 and then the new 12. Next slide, please. So Route 79. Route 79 would continue operating along Snyder Avenue between, Columbus Boulevard and 29th Street, but the route is proposed to be extended on the eastern end to Pier 70, and also extending it north to 40th and Market. So that would be the western endpoint for the Route 79. And this is really creating new connections for South Philly residents into University City and a direct connection to the Market Frankfurt line. And this would be 10-minute service on weekdays and on weekends. Next slide, please. All right, 32 and the Route 49. So I'm just going to give a little context on this service proposal here. So about 2 years ago, when we started this process, I remember wondering if Route 49 would be preserved in the proposed network. And I love all of SEPTA services as a service planner, but the 49 was a labor of love because I implemented the 49 and it was a heavy lift, but it was such a great addition to our network. However, exactly 1 year after we launched the 49, pandemic stay-at-home orders were put in place. And so the function of Route 49 changed drastically. And so I'm sharing this to say that with a lot of other service proposals that are being introduced, I really am pleased with the proposal to combine routes 32 and 49, because I know people really fell in love with the 49, was creating really good connections. And so we heard from you. And so this is an effort to really retain some of those key connections between South Philly and North Philadelphia. And so the combination of routes 32 and 49 provides a direct connection, between South Philly and Manayunk via Strawberry Mansion and Fairmount, while retaining critical connections to the jobs, education, and health resources in University City. This route would operate 2 service patterns. And so the A designation would be the second pattern. The primary route would operate at least 15 minutes between 33rd and Dauphin and 33rd and Dickinson in South Philly, with every other trip operating north of Dauphin Loop to Ridge and Lyceum, right? Retaining that 39 alignment. And this would operate about every 30 minutes. So as Bethany mentioned, with the route counts, you'll see some instances where we see the route name and then you see A, that is a pattern for that route. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the second. So this is the Ridge and Lyceum alignment, the whole route rather, right? This includes the southern portion here to 33rd and Dickinson, operating all the way up to Manayunk, the current terminus at Ridge and Lyceum for the 32. And so this is a really good connection as well, because we're connecting Northwest Philadelphia directly with University City, as well as South Philadelphia. So big improvements here with this concept. Next slide. So here I'm just going to run through a few other updates. Something that we heard from the fall round of engagement, big items was the 17 and the 33. We were, in that draft, we were proposing to combine the 33 and the 17 into a north-south route, removing that L-shaped alignment into Center City. So we heard from our customers and we have restored the existing alignments for both routes. We're keeping the L-shaped alignment for the 17 and the 33 into Center City. And in addition to keeping those existing routings, we have realigned northbound service on Route 33. So this is actually in the Francisville Sharswood neighborhood. And so we're proposing to tighten up the couplet for the north-south service in North Philadelphia. So instead of operating on 22nd and 19th Streets, we would be tightening that couplet and operating northbound on 21st Street above Ridge Avenue instead of 19th Street. Thank you. Next slide. And so this slide here just shows access. This is network wide. This is for the entire service area. So you can see the real improvements. So this is access to jobs. So this is jobs, and then the number of people within a quarter mile of frequent transit. And this was a snapshot of weekdays at noon. And so you can see about an 18% increase in the number of people that would have access within a quarter mile of frequent transit over today's network. And then about 17% more jobs that will be accessible within a quarter mile based on with our new network. Now, this slide here just shows demographics across the population, with low income residents, minorities, older adults, and people with disabilities. And you can see that all of these groups, everyone really is winning with this draft network here. You can see 7% increase, 11%, 11%, and 18% increases for these groups of individuals that would be within a quarter mile of frequent transit on weekdays at noon. So again, real benefits and wins with the draft network. And I'll turn it back over to Bethany.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brandon. So I see there's a handful of comments in the Q&A. I want to encourage you all to keep posting some comments. And if you have any, go ahead and we'll get to them in just a second. What I was going to do is just talk to you a little bit more about what we're doing in terms of engagement. And again, just really emphasize that we do really appreciate everyone's feedback and participation in this project. It is influencing how we're making decisions, and we're excited to hear more from you in the next couple weeks. A few things that we are trying to do and that actually have started this week is do a little bit more of meeting people where they are, where you have a project bus that is wrapped in the Bus Revolution logo. You can look for that at some bus stops and at transportation centers. People were out today. They'll continue to be out a few times every week for the next several weeks. We are also updating our materials. Hopefully you're finding them easier to understand and easier to see what has changed and what hasn't changed. And we're just really trying to simplify everything to make it easier for you to see what we're doing, to understand what we're doing, and then to comment and respond to it. So we have made a lot of changes to the project website, and we continue to have a little bit more information that we are going to be posting and sharing with you. But when you go to the busrevolution.com website, you'll see this page as when you first land on the website, and then you can look at the system maps and look at the route by route information to see what has changed. We also have these webinars. We're holding one on Mondays between today and May 8th. There's no meeting next week, but otherwise we will have meetings targeted to each of the sub areas. They'll be very similar to this one, with plenty of time for Q&A. The project bus, which I was just mentioning, today they're at the 69th terminal, but they will be all throughout the service area for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So hopefully you'll catch us there or see us there. We're also holding a handful of community meetings. The first one is this Wednesday. It will be at the East Passyunk Recreation Center, and we'll be there from 6 to 8. We'll be doing a short presentation, also have open house, and I think there are hoagies available, or there will be food there for folks who stop by. So, and I think we're also raffling off a few things as well. So we really hope to see you. Thanks for coming tonight, but we are going to go into the Q&A. But just before we go to that, I just wanted to let everybody know what's ahead for the Bus Revolution and sort of where we are in the project, because we do get that question a lot. We had a lot of feedback, as both Brandon and I have been mentioning, in the fall, and then we took all that information and have been reconfiguring the bus network, recalculating our numbers. We're sharing that bus network now. We will continue to share it through the spring, through the middle of May, and then we'll take your feedback again and then update the network one more time. And then in the fall, we'll bring those recommended or the draft recommended changes through the SEPTA hearing process. So you will be able to see that process, and then there'll be another round of engagement as well in the fall. And so with that, Bianca, I think we can go to the Q&A. I see there's a handful of comments and questions that people have posed, so we can start to go through that.
Sounds great. Thank you. Yeah. So there is one question. How will the Bus Revolution address interventions like bus-only lanes, signal prioritization across the network, and bus stop consolidation?
So I'll start, Brandon, and then if you want to add something. So Bianca, the way that I understood the question that you just read was that there was 2 pieces to it, right? One was about bus priority lanes and signal prioritization, things like that. And then there was a second one about bus stop. What are we going to do with bus stops? And so the first piece about bus lanes and signal priorities, we 100% agree that bus lanes are really super important. They're the future of making sure that bus service is fast and reliable and convenient for everyone. We are working, or SEPTA is working with the City of Philadelphia and some of the suburban jurisdictions as well about where and how we can prioritize transit and make it faster and more reliable. There are a handful of projects that you're already seeing being rolled out. I think Brandon was talking about Chestnut Street and the bus lane on that. And so you did see we are adding a couple more bus routes onto that street to try to take advantage of that infrastructure. And there's other corridors that would be good targets. So we are definitely talking about that. The other part of the question was about bus stops, and the bus stops, yes, we are looking at bus stops, and we're looking at ways that we can better locate and balance bus stops throughout the network. You'll start to see some more information about that in the coming weeks. And I don't know, Brandon, if there's something else that we can answer or you can add to that.
No, yeah, definitely that everything's on the table with transit prioritization, right? But we're fairly limited with the street grid and, in the city, at least for sure, with, the number of locations. I did just want to highlight that, SEPTA is working with the city and Otis specifically, and we're working with them on Alney Avenue. So there are going to be some big improvements coming on Alney Avenue in the future as well. And so there will be some aspects incorporated along Alney with respect to transit prioritization. So great question, but we are pushing for it across the service area.
Thank you. Yeah, we have another question. In a recent SEPTA update, it was mentioned that the proposed changes to the 7 were mostly rolled back, but did not see that covered here for South Philly. What will the 7 route look like in revised Revolution?
Okay, I can take this one. Bethany, you want to, oh, great. You're going to show it.
Go ahead.
So the 7 will be shortened. We're proposing to shorten the 7, which still operate between, well, the northern endpoint would retain at, what's this, 33rd and Dauphin, but we would be shortening the route at 20th and Johnston. So for customers that were traveling east of 20th Street along Oregon Avenue, you'd be able to transfer to the Route G, which is a 10-minute route. And so a transfer would be required to continue east on Oregon Avenue, but it would be from 20th and Johnston to 33rd and Dauphin. This will be about every 15 minutes during the peak periods and every 30 minutes at other times of the day.
Thank you, Brandon. We have a question. Ooh. Has the school information been uploaded on the website?
So yes, the remix map and all the maps that we have do show the bus routes. The what we call the 400 series. I think. Let me see if I can find those to show you. Hold on, I'm just going to look at them offline, and you can give ask. Maybe there's another question for Brandon while I look to try to show those.
Sure thing. We have a question. Will the routes with articulated buses, such as the 17 and the 33, stay articulated in the proposed service plan?
So currently, yeah, the plan is that those lines would continue to operate 60-foot vehicles. Yes.
And we have a question. Will Route 17 go down to South Philly still?
Yeah, so the 17 would look the same as well. It would go down to South Philly. But if this question is asking about service like south of Oregon Avenue, so we do operate limited service on the 17 down to the Navy Yard, through Packer Park. And so though that service alignment would not be operated on the 17 anymore. So 17 would look the same for, up till to Oregon and Johnston, but we are proposing to remove that pattern. It's limited service currently, so I'm hoping that they're not down there. I'm wondering where they are, but it's still going to South Philly.
All right, and let me just, wait a minute. We did add I need to check and see to make sure that all of the school bus services are in the remix file. I'll have to check on that tomorrow morning, but we did add them all into the network. This is kind of, I don't know how easy or useful this is to folks right now, but where they are, these bus routes should be in the system. I just need to make sure they're marked accordingly. But the school bus services are included in the analysis, and they should be there for everyone to see.
Thank you. We have another question. With the Route 7 change, what bus connections will go to Pier 70 Mall?
So yeah, there's a bunch of bus routes that go to the Pier 70 Mall. 6 lines. I think you can see this, the 29, the 64, the 79, the 556, and the 2 versions of the G. So yeah, there's still several routes that serve the Pier 70 Mall. And many of them are frequent as well.
We have another question. I did not see the 64 get covered in this session. Will it have any changes?
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. The biggest change on the 64 is removing the dip that it does off of Grace Ferry Avenue to Reed and Wharton Streets. And so we're actually proposing to keep service straight on Grace Ferry. We get hung up a lot coming out of that section right there, getting back to Grace Ferry. So this would really improve the reliability for Route 64. But this is the one change that is being proposed for the 64 to no longer dip down into Grace Ferry and serve the Reed and Wharton Streets.
We have another question. Will Route 33 take the left turn at Ridge Avenue to 21st Street?
All right, that is a specific question. Can you read it?
21st.
Okay. Want to take that, Brandon?
Yeah, can you pan down? That's that mid route. That's that alignment at Ridge.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the northbound direction.
Right.
And then
And so and what's the question again, Bianca? I'm trying to see. Well,
will the route still take the left turn at Ridge Avenue to 21st?
Yeah, southbound, yes.
in the southbound, we'd still be doing that. It's just the northbound that would be impacted with this realignment here.
Is there any announcements on whether or not the route numbers will change in this project?
So yes, depending on what the final recommendations are for the bus revolution, we will have to change some bus routes. And it is something that SEPTA is looking at very deliberately and carefully, because we want to make sure that we take advantage of, we unroll a network that's easy to understand and easy to use, and maybe correct a few things in the existing system, like the use of letters. But there's been no decisions made. If you have any strong opinions or comments or ideas that you want to submit, we'd love to hear them. But there will be some changes, because depending on what the final recommendations are, we are changing some bus routes. So some of the names and numbers will have to change, but no decisions have been made yet.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question just about the changes of the 32 and the current network and what it could be changed to. Specifically looking at currently, does it run on Broad Street? Or are we thinking of a different route?
No, yeah, that is another big change for the 32. Currently, it does operate on Broad Street. That segment on Broad Street south of City Hall would still be served by Route 27, right? So if customers are in Northwest Philadelphia, Ridge, Henry Ave vicinity, 32 and 27 operate same area, Northwest Philly. The 27 still provides that Broad Street connectivity south of City Hall. So that is a good one. So 32 would no longer be doing that.
Are there any plans for increasing the size of buses on Route 47 to alleviate overcrowding?
This has not, from an operational perspective, I think we were told that we could not operate the 60-foot buses on the 47. This is a really good question. I wasn't a part of those conversations, so I don't have all the background on it, but I do know that it was kind of pretty much a no, that we could not deploy those RTICs on that line.
Some really narrow streets and tight turns.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of Philadelphia.
Yes. Especially when detours and stuff, a lot of considerations there.
And I really think that was the big thing, Bianca. Thanks for mentioning that, because 47 is subjected to regular detours. And I definitely, I know for a fact that that was part of, you know, operations call to say we can't use 60-foot vehicles on that line, but it was evaluated.
Thank you. We have a question on the Route 556. Is this a new one?
I just brought it up. And I think probably the question is, why do we have that number and why didn't we? It's sort of like the 25, but parts of it are actually not so much. I guess it's a new route. It's mostly a new route, which is why we use the 3-digit number. And I think you'll see that in a couple of places when, especially if you look at some of the materials that we have online, that there are a handful of bus routes that we kept those 3-digit numbers for. And we kept those in cases where it was an entirely new route, or we thought we couldn't assign it to existing route. It was changed enough that it wasn't enough like the 12 or the 32 or the 49. If when we combine two routes or use portions of two routes, we tried to use that convention of saying like the 3249 or the 4042. But in some cases it just didn't work. And so we retain those 3-digit numbers. And those are some of the bus routes. If we keep the 556, for example, we will give it a number that matches the rest of the network if it ends up being a final recommended bus route.
Thank you. We have another question here. With less transfers in the network, will we only have one free transfer, or are there any plans for time-based transfers?
So I can take a stab at that, Brandon. You might know more than me about that, but first of all, thank you for knowing that the first transfer is free, especially if you use your key card. I think that that is an important part of the way that the network works. And I do think that the fare policy and some of the fare discussions are happening with a separate team. I don't know, Brandon, if you have any insights into that, but I don't.
No, that's pretty much where we are having conversations. And I think that we can anticipate to hear something soon with our upcoming operating budget hearings. And so I would ask everyone to kind of just stay tuned for our upcoming operating budget hearings. And they should be in May. Don't quote me, but they're upcoming. So
right. And I did
look out for them. Yeah,
and I did see somebody in the Q&A did make a comment that to please make it clear that the transfer is only free if you use a key card. And I think that that is an important piece of information. So if you have a key card and you make a transfer, it's entirely free. There's no charge. But if you don't have a key card, you do have to pay.
We have a question about Route 18. Will all versions of the 18 travel through Olney and Rising Sun?
Let me get that. So is this one of the ones? So we have 18 and 70. And then we also have 18 and 67. So this is, again, you're starting to see some of our bus numbering conventions in the way that we tried to retain as much of the, use the numbers that would make sense to folks, but in some cases we had to double them up. And so, yep, all of the buses all of these routes, in both of these cases, these routes would run the same way every day, all day. So sorry, I probably should have kept that up for a moment. So this is the 1867. It begins up here at Bustleton and then goes right to Olney and Broad. And then the 1870, I'm not sure which route people were, Torresdale Avenue into Olney. And
then the 818 as well. It's going there. It's also serving.
oh, okay, yeah,
the loop
you're
as
right.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
818.
And I think they're asking about Rising Sun, but this one is not. Yeah.
So that's right near the Cedar Grove marker, kind of right over there. It's in this area.
Yeah, I'm just not sure because the 1870, 1867. Yeah. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure. Do you know if this 1870 will have 60-foot buses, Brandon? Somebody answered that one, asked that question as well.
I think we might be keeping those for the 818. I'm not sure for the longest, portion of the new line. So I think it would be for the 818 services that we keep the Arctics.
Okay. And then I see another question about the OWL service and how the bus revolution would affect the OWL service. And what we did, and most of the red routes, the 10 max routes, are also 24-hour day service. So if it's a 10 max or 10-minute route, it does have that 24-hour day service. Many of the purple routes also have 24 hours, some have 22 hours. When we were going through and really trying to balance the budget and add as much frequency as we possibly could, offer the longest span of service, we did go through and we looked at each of the bus routes. And in some cases, if we didn't think we absolutely had to operate 24 hours, we did roll it back. So you can, that might be something that we can talk a little bit more, write a fact sheet about. But when you pick a bus route, here, let me pick a one of the 10 max routes, you can see the span of service from time of day. So you can see this one starts at 4 a.m. and operates every 30 minutes until 6 a.m., then goes to 10 minutes. And then from midnight until 4 a.m., you can see that it's still operating. And if you look at one of the, this is one of the purple routes, the 818 that we were just talking about. This one begins at 4 a.m., but it does end at 2 a.m. So there's 2 hours of where there's not service from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. And we did do a really close look at all of those bus routes where we didn't, for the 15-minute routes, we wanted to operate all of them 24 hours a day, but we were really trying to balance the budget and maximize the impact of the network. So in some cases, that's a place where we did roll things back a little bit. Oh, I'm just going to take this because I see somebody's asked this question a couple of times about does the bus revolution make SEPTA safer? And so I want to make sure that we get to that because I saw it at least twice. And the thing is, I think the safety issue, it depends on how you look at it. It is a complicated issue, safety and personal security. We tried to be really sensitive. We heard a lot of comments, as I mentioned earlier, about safety. And for some people, they feel safer if the bus is going to come more often. So they like the idea of frequency. Other people feel safer when the bus comes closer to their house and they don't have to walk, or their destination, where they're going to or where they're coming from. And so they feel safer if they don't have to walk as far. And so we tried to balance that as much as we could. I think one of the things that Brandon was talking a little bit about was the 4 and the 16. And this was a case where we sort of split the difference a little bit, where we had 4 and 16 operating. We combined them in the fall, and we were able to operate them a little bit more frequently. But then we got a lot of some comments from folks who live close to 9th 9th Street, and they really wanted that bus stop and the bus service brought closer to their home. They didn't feel safe walking to Broad Street. So that was one of the reasons why we made the 4 the way that we did, and then changed the 16 a little bit. So there is a lot of frequency still in some parts of of Broad Street, but we did split that to try to balance that with the safety issue. So it's really difficult. We only have so many bus hours, and we're trying to really balance those 2 things to make people feel as safe as they can. For the bus revolution, the 2 tools that we had was making routes more frequent, or also kind of balancing that with coverage. So I hope that that answers your question. I don't know if there's anything you would add to that, Brandon?
That was good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Bethany. We have another question here. So Route 33 currently goes up 19 on the northbound from Ridge Avenue, but with the change, will the bus now turn left on Ridge and then continue to 21st Street?
Yeah, I'll take this. Could you zoom in a little bit on this map, on this section here, and then toggle to the outbound tab, please?
Oops, did I get it? No.
Okay.
That was the right one? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so we will be making the left on Ridge Avenue. So currently, we come up 20th, this is College Avenue, and we kind of go across the intersection, and this is 19th Street. So we would be making the left from College onto Ridge, and then picking up 21st Street here. All right. And again, this is just tightening the couplet between north and southbound service in the community. So yes, making the left onto Ridge Avenue from College Ave.
Thank you, Brandon. We have a question. Will the expanded capacity for routes serving schools be tailored to the bell schedules of schools along specific routes? For example, school district middle and high schools start between 7:30 and 9, depending on the school, and dismiss between 2:30 and 4.
Right, I can take a stab at this, and then again, Brandon, if there's something that I missed or that you want to add to, feel free to jump in. So yes, one of the ways that we did increase frequency for the bus routes that serve schools or serve a lot of students, we did increase frequency at those key times. And there was one of the ones that Brandon and I were talking about today. I can't remember if it was I don't know if you remember which one that was, but there was one that when you look at the increased frequency, you can see that it starts earlier. Like a traditional peak tends to be like peak time for commuting is between 4 and 6. And in some bus routes, you'll see that increased frequency starts at 2 p.m., which is exactly what you're talking about, and continues until 6, right? So we've just increased frequency for a longer period of time, because we know that there's a lot of students that are getting out of school during that time.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on earlier when you mentioned how you were ensuring that the school service was in the network. So we will be continuing our practice of like that regular communication with the district and the individual schools, rather, on any updated bell times. So we will be continuing to tailor trip times on respective lines with bell times.
Thank you. I see a question related to Route 45 frequencies and the decision to change the frequency to less frequent.
Yep, this is one that we have, and again, I'll start, Brandon, and then you can jump in if you've got other things to add. So this is one that we did spend a lot of time kind of going back and forth on. And one of the key ideas that we had with the Bus Revolution project in general was to try to spread the service around in certain ways. So in this case, you have the Route 47, which comes every 10 minutes, and you can see it's actually even more frequent at sometimes. It comes every 8 minutes, and then a couple blocks in the other direction, you have the Broad Street line, which the Broad Street line is among the most frequent services in the whole network. And then we also run the 16 as well on that corridor. And so for the 45, we operate that less frequently. We did increase the frequencies from the fall because we did hear from that quite a bit from folks. A lot of concerns about that and about being left behind. You can see during peak periods, the bus comes every 12 minutes and then every 15 minutes for most of the day. So it's colored teal. On the weekend days, it does have lower levels of service, but on the weekdays, it does have a very, very frequent service. Again, that's very much in response to the feedback that we received. And we're trying to hold on to this principle that, operating frequent service, on a lot of parallel corridors that are really close together, we can get a little bit more bang out of our buck if we spread some of that frequency throughout the network. But we did roll back some of that recommendation quite a bit, especially on weekdays, in response to comments. So hopefully, again, that answers your question. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Bethany. I don't see any additional questions in here right now.
All right, I'm just giving, does anybody else have any questions that they, or feel like their question didn't get answered?
Here's one. What changes are going to happen to Route C33?
What was that one again? C33?
Oh, sorry, just Route 33. I don't.
Okay.
I said that. There's no C's.
No. I think we talked about the 33 a little bit. It's kind of pretty much back to where it was, except for we kept the couplet in, around right here. We brought this bus route's on the 20th and 19, I think. And what's it on today, Brandon?
22nd and 19.
Right, so we brought that.
So for Miss Menifee, yeah, same endpoints, 23rd and Venango to Penn's Landing. And as Bethany mentioned, so we would be, the northbound service above Ridge would be operating on 21st Street instead of 19th Street. So we'd be doing 21st Street up to York, kind of how we do now, instead of 19th to Diamond to 21st to York. So streamlining the service in North Philly to operate northbound via 21st Street above Ridge.
I see one last question here. So there no buses stop at 17th and Market, which is very inconvenient. Just for further clarification, is this in relation to a specific route or just in general?
I think it's about a bus stop.
At 17th and Market.
Yeah, so you can see, I mean, this is only one route, but there is no bus stop. There's one at 18th and there's one at 16th, but there isn't one at 17th. And so I think that that's common is they're saying that they would like to have one there as well. And I think one of the things that we're looking at as part of the bus revolution, but we haven't made any decisions or really spent a lot of time talking about yet, is how closely to space the bus stops. And many of you may know SEPTA has among the most closely spaced bus stops of any transit system in the whole United States. And that's great. It makes the system, you don't have to walk as far, but in many cases, it also means that the bus stops too often and moves really slowly through the city streets. So we are looking at all of the corridors, all of the bus stops, and trying to see if there's places where we can rebalance them, move some closer, move some so that they're better located in front of important destinations or stopping at places where we know a lot of people are getting out, like making sure they're in front of senior centers and high schools and grocery stores and things like that.
Thank you, Bethany. Looks like we are done with the Q&A. We don't have any additional questions.
All right, that's great. So hopefully everybody got answers to the questions that they were looking for. I just want to show a couple of quick things. Actually, if we have a minute, let me bring up the SEPTA Bus Revolution website and just show everybody a couple of things quickly while we have a couple. Oh, it's 7:30 actually, but I'll just do this super quickly. We do have system maps. The slider map's not here yet, but it will be coming probably in the next day or two. The remix map, which we were just going over, is this is available for you all to take a look at and leave comments in if you want to. You can also pick a bus route that you're interested in. A lot of people ask questions about the 33, for example, and it will tell you a little bit about the change and why the change was made. There is also the transit. We had one transit talk on March 20th. You can see the presentation, listen to the recording if you want to. The pop-ups is the project bus. You can see the dates, the locations, and the times. The in-person community meetings. There's a handful more that have been scheduled already that will be updated tomorrow. And then there's still a handful that we need to schedule. So you can take a look at those. And then the bus revolution webinars like we held tonight. These are also listed, and we will be posting the slides and the recording for you as well. So with that, I think we can sign off and just thank everybody for coming and listening to us, asking us questions. We do really love hearing from you, and we look forward to seeing you at events soon.
All right, good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.